Russell said it best, you hippie farmers, right? I mean,
All right.
you can build some beneficials and what have you out there, ladybugs and all, but when you start getting that much pressure, good luck. I mean, it's tough.
So we use a lot of sugar as a preventative, and I've had people call me before with like stink bugs, and they're like, "Hey man, I've got 9 stink bugs on each plant. Can I spray a pound of sugar?" Hell no, you should have sprayed that 2 months ago. Sugar is a preventative. Like what you want to do is we know the perimeter of this field first, and then they're going to move inside. You want this bricks level in the edge of this field to be extremely high. They're going to eat it. They consume that. They retain the moisture because of the sugar. It actually bloats them, and they don't want it anymore. So if you're going to try to use sugar, which I mean we do, farmers do, you've got to hit them in the first 30 feet of this field. If you're seeing pest pressure out here, it's time to break out the insecticide. That's just how it works. And I don't know, in 5 years, we've had probably 3 cornfields and 2 bean fields operation that we've had to spray an insecticide, but it was, a situation like this where we met threshold. And when you're at threshold, economically, it's, do we set the system back a little bit or do we lose our crop? I'm going to set it back a little bit and maintain profitability. But like if I had to, if Grant had and spray this with a bifenthrin, what can Grant do this fall or next season in this field to help build it back? I mean, what's an idea that y'all would have? Something as simple as a 10-foot pollinator strip right here on the road. He doesn't have to lose a lot of acres, but he could simply plant a 10-foot pollinator the grass and probably see more benefit from that than the damage he's going to cause in this insecticide pass that he could spray to get rid of these aphids. Look at him, he's so upset he's leaving us. Come back, Grant. I was just joking.
Now he's got to go order the insecticide.
Yeah.
Call the planes in.
But, I was told when I first started farming and going to soil health conferences and field days, how many and you have ever heard another speaker say that if you spray Roundup or herbicide or an insecticide, heard that we nuke the soil and we sterilize the soil? How many of you, just show of hands, how many people have heard that? All right, it's bullshit. I'm going to show you some stuff later today, but we can talk about it in the field. We did Haney, PLFA, and metagenomics, triple replicated across several fields. We sprayed 1.6 gallons of chemistry. How much do you think that hurt biology with 1.6 gallons of chemistry on that soil? No idea, and nobody wants to get, man, y'all are quiet today. It was.
I think they had too much Coors Light last night.
Maybe that's what it was.
You're saying 1.6 for the rate, not like what we'd normally be spraying as a quart.
No, so
You're saying 1.6.
1.6 gallons of chemicals, of product.
Yeah.
So typically
That's
on
a
my
lot.
farm, if we have really nice cover crops, we use, we don't see residuals. Somebody was talking about we're talking about nitrogen. Hey, we put our nitrogen out, why didn't we make it in the profile? It got tied up. You get a cover crop this tall and you roll it down and then you come out here and you spray a residual herbicide. Do you think that herbicide made it into the soil profile to be a residual herbicide? About 80% of it, 70% of it gets tied up in that residue.
You need a hell of a good rain to wash it off.
We don't typically use residual herbicides unless we have a problem with our cover crop. Now, if we get a cover crop stand that's absolute crap or the small grain doesn't do good and we've got really good legumes that we know they're going to be gone within a month, we'll come out at that V2, V4 and we'll put a residual out. If we've got, on the 2-hour trip up here, if you've got a huge bowl in this part of the field where it got flooded out and your cover crop doesn't look good, then we'll put residual out here at planting time where we don't have cover crops. The other side of the field, I'm not wasting my money. But typically that's how our program is. When we were doing this study, they said we don't want to use what the farmers in North Carolina are using on average. So we used a quart of Roundup, 2 quarts of atrazine, a pint and a half of Dual, and then we came back over the top with another quart of Roundup, Status, and Haley, and another half a quart of atrazine. What we saw, and this was tillage versus chemistry, and this was no-till and tillage, chemistry and no chemistry, all of these 4 plots. Soil biology went down about 10% for about days. After that 10 to 14 days, soil biology was actually functioning at a higher rate where we used the chemistry versus where we had the tillage at. And so everybody kept telling me, well, you should just go out there and, you know, you can make a tillage pass, a single tillage pass, and it won't hurt biology as much as chemistry will. Well, we got plots, and we're on our 2nd year doing the study that shows that that's actually false. We went out there, like Ray Archuleta used to tell me, hey, if you have gray leaf or southern rust, if you use a fungicide because it's non-selective, that 7 ounces of fungicide is somehow going to make it down here in the soil, and it's going to kill all your fungi. And what, you know, Ray was being told by people who said they were studying this, but they weren't actually getting real scientific data on it. So now we've done studies where we've put out a single rate of fungicide, a double rate of fungicide, and a triple rate of fungicide. And how much do you think that did to soil biology? You know, we saw a 5%, maybe a 10% drop for about a 2-week period, and then biology came back. And so if you need to use something, don't be afraid to use it. You're not going to destroy all the millions of microbes in this ground with a single pass. Now, you may do 6 passes over a season, but if you have a problem like this, fix the problem and then make it better. That's all you got to do.
Grant said something yesterday, and I was going to talk on it and then I didn't, but I hear it all the time that, well, I've just got dead soil. How many times do you hear that? My soils are dead. You know, Grant was mentioning we got all this rain, I lost all my microbes, my soil's dead, or my microbes are dead. They're not dead.
They might not be functioning.
They're not functioning, and they're dormant, you know, but they're not dead. It starts drying out, they start to come to life again. If they were dead, how many of those nodules would you have on that bean plant?
Yeah. How many, y'all, pretty much the whole group grow soybeans? I'm gonna pick on y'all this morning since nobody wants to talk. So what are these 2 leaves called right here on the very bottom? Cotyledons. You were close. So we got our cotyledons. If you're cool, go out and cut these cotyledons off before you get to the 6 trifolia. Just pick like 50 foot a row. If you got kids and they get in trouble, this is their like what they got to do to send them out work on the farm. But go cut like 50 feet or 20 feet of soybeans. Cut those 2 cotyledons 6 and see what happens in that 50 foot. You'll lose 25% of your soybean yield. Like whatever like who was talking about they made like 14 bushel beans? Are they not back in the
Maybe
group?
it's 20.
Oh, he's on the cattle tour.
He left us.
I guarantee you, if he's making 14 bushel beans, field he's dropping these cotyledons before V6 or the 6 trifolia. If you drop these cotyledons before the 6 trifolia, you cut yield 25%. There's your other plant that they're all shriveled up, but then you've got a bunch of them that are lush and green. And so when I told y'all yesterday that we put a little bit of nitrogen in the early part of the season because you've got nodulation, but do you think that these nodules are feeding this plant yet? They're not feeding it yet. If you're going to look at nodulation, you've got to take these nodules, take a pocket knife or your fingernail, and cut them open, and these are still white. So even though he has nodules, he has not fixated nitrogen in them yet to feed this plant. And so this plant right now is running purely off of what is in the soil. And it probably will for at least the next week or 2 when he starts hitting that, 4th, 5th trifolia. And then it'll start taking just a little of those. But he doesn't have nitrogen in them yet. If you cut them open and look, they're still white. So put a little bit of nitrogen, 10, 15 pounds. That doesn't cost a lot of money. You'll see a healthier plant. You'll see these cotyledons will actually become like thicker. You'll have a really nice thick leaf. And then the way that we can also look at it, hold it up to the sun and take a look. If you hold it up to the sun like we did the corn plants, see how translucent it is? Like we can see things in these plants without having to spend money on testing and make very small adjustments out here that cost $2 to $5 an acre and maximize production out of this crop and have very, very little environmental impact with that.
You know, one thing I would mention too, like you guys grow a lot of rye, right? Rye head of beans, right? Sucking up a lot of that excess nitrogen out of that profile as well. And I guess I never really thought of it until Russell was sitting here talking about that nitrogen. Because even when I'm looking at the Haney test and looking at the organic to inorganic nitrogen, we had a lot more inorganic nitrogen than organic nitrogen. And now we're up in 1.8 in the 2 range of organic to inorganic. So in the springtime when that soil's cool, we're not getting a lot of that nitrogen cycling to occur, really. So we're really kind of starving it. And rye now, the first couple years, man, we could grow 6 foot, 7 foot rye almost, not a problem. And now our rye has come down to this. Part of it is we're not feeding as much nitrogen out there to that corn crop as we used to. The other part is we're not getting that free nitrogen. Soybeans are really kind of puny.
Well, it was so frail that when I touched this plant, I was hoping it was going to stay attached. There's this cotyledon. I mean, y'all can see how yellow it is. All right. So this one fell off whenever I touched the plant. The other one was already gone. That plant right there has already lost 25% of its yield. I ain't trying to pick on you, sorry.
Looks like crop insurance here.
Well, I mean,
when you go in flower.
Well, I mean, you can look at them. So, I mean, you've got good cotyledons here. This one's yellow. This one's starting to turn yellow. Look at those two in front of you. Like, that's what I'm saying, is that we can walk our field. Now, if this was my farm and I walked this field and I saw the amount of yellow or the cotyledons that are off, I'm not going to push this crop. I'm not going to come out here and I'm not going to make 4 or 5 foliar passes. I'm not, try to push a lot of PGRs. Now, he's still early enough at this, third trifolia that he still has a lot of good bean plants out here. He could make a $4 pass with an early season PGR and actually help push some of these plants. Put a little bit of S17 or some form of nitrogen to kind of pep a little nitrogen up here. I'm talking spending $2 an acre on that pass.
Melted urea?
Melted urea would be fine. Start getting a little bit of nitrogen and give these a boost before, and being as saturated as you are, compounding the problem, but you can still rescue 80% of these plants. And then if you start seeing these green back up and if you start seeing good plant health, then you would have to come back and make the decision, are we going to try to push this crop or not? But it's just a way to visually come out here early season plants and know, what am I going to expect out of this farm? Now, if we walk down this row and a full 10 feet had dropped all of these cotyledons, we're going to I'd clean up the weeds and leave it till the end of the season. That's essentially the management decision we would make on ours.
That's lack of early nitrogen, the biggest.
Yeah, cold and wet.
So would a legume and a cover crop be enough nitrogen for your beans to start with?
Well, the problem with that is what David was talking about. When you're super saturated and you're cold, even though he would have had a cover crop here with a legume in it, that organic nitrogen still the ground has to be warm enough for this bean plant to start using some of that nitrogen. Or David said, if you've got a big tall cover crop out here and you soak all that nitrogen up, and now that cover crop's here, what's that cover crop do? That cover crop keeps the ground cooler, correct? And it also helps retain moisture. Well, in a year like this where you've had too much rain and we're in the middle of July and I had chills this morning up there, those are 2 more against you there. And so, it's a give and a take. And that's why I think, what David was talking about yesterday, maybe you want to spray out those planter passes with chemistry and have a little bit of bare dirt there to warm it up. Or maybe you want to run and maybe warm some of that up. I don't know if you'd have to do it every year, but I would guarantee you this year it would have been a benefit.
Yeah. When you talk about that too, how many GDUs does it take to get corn out of the ground?
Man, they must have hit the keg hard last night.
150 up here. I would say 100 and 110 generally, right? So when we plant into a cover crop, and Russell mentioned it keeps that ground cooler, we can have ambient air temperatures that be 85 degrees, and the neighbor's corn will come up pretty quick when worked ground. Cover crop, it takes an additional 20 to almost 30 GDUs to get it up out of the ground because it's so much cooler in that environment. So that's been a challenge for me, trying to get that seed off to a good start and get it up out of the ground quicker. So that's why I'm looking at doing spray or strip till or something. And you had mentioned about legumes and cover crops, which up here you don't grow legumes like we do down south. But I had a farmer who had a little bit of his corn mix still in his drill. He was going to a field that he was going to plant beans into, straight rye. He just threw the rye in on top of it, planted it out. So it was like 6 pounds of vetch, 6 pounds of crimson clover in it. Beautiful stand of legumes in there for, 5-10 acres of a field. Those beans looked great. They got tall, they were beautiful, less, but it had a tremendous amount of nitrogen in it. So it's a difference between a little bit and a lot. A little bit can go a long ways with this.
Who's going to be my 2 victims this morning? I'll hand you that one. What's that deficient in? Oh, he done lost our sample. What's the deficiency in that plant? And you can pass them around after we talk about them. Any ideas, guesses? Do you see the hollow part? You see the hollowed out parts? What is that? Now, I like tissue testing. I mean, we do a boatload of it. But there's also ways to come out in your field early season. Like early season right now, split that main stem and look. We start getting beans this tall and you start getting real fat branches, you can even start cutting the branches just like that. And you can actually stage out where you're seeing this problem at for the entire growing season without having to spend money on tissue sampling. But do you know what that is? Close. I'll give you one more guess. Boron. So when we start seeing those hollowed parts out in the main stem this early in the season, his plants are having a hard time getting to boron. Now, those are deficient of boron? Could be. We don't know. I haven't seen a soil test on this field. But I can also say with the amount of rainfall we've gotten, what are our 3 most leachable nutrients? Nitrogen's one, sulfur's the other, boron. So how much rain have you had here?
30.
About 30 inches of rainfall. Do you think that if we had boron in this field at planting time, that it's still the same amount here? Not even close. So this right here would be, you were talking earlier about farmers broadcasting dry potassium. Dry potassium anymore. I treat my soils kind of like I do my bourbon at home. My soils are on a liquid diet like I am. Right now he could come out here, he could spray a quart of 10% boron over these plants. A little bit of PGR, a little bit of nitrogen, you'd probably see, like if you field and came back in 2 weeks, this side over here would probably be lush green and completely different than that side. And you're probably going to spend $6-7 an acre to do that pass. That's still less than a bushel of beans. And his yield would probably be significantly different where he spent less than a bushel of beans in.
What's boron critical for in that plant? Sugar. So the plants that produce the most sugar and that can move the most sugar through that plant and down into the root system will win. So you want to have as much sugar in there as possible.
Are you with AEA? I'm not picking on you here. Me and Kemp agree on a few things and we disagree on other things. The one thing I'll say that Kemp did teach me and the one thing that I've seen, what is the one nutrient that that plant needs to use calcium to build cells? Boron. If you are deficient on of the calcium in that plant is going to be lower. So if we know that the plant uses nitrogen and also calcium to build cells for cell division and growth, and you're deficient on boron, you have now limited half of the growth of that plant in the efficiency of what it can use in calcium. So now it's going to rely more on what? Well, what does nitrogen do in the plant? What is when we have high nitrogen levels in the plant, what does it attract? Pest. So now that he has a little bit of aphids out here and he's low on boron and we're not using as much calcium and the plant's trying to use, what does that tell the pest to do? Hey, come on over here, we got a buffet. So there's a lot of factors that boron has within that plant. And it's not expensive. I mean, we run a lot of Solubor. I think for us to put out a whole pound of boron with Solubor takes an acre. Now the problem is, and what you have to know, and this is what farmers haven't been educated on the agronomy side, if you buy 10% liquid boron, it's in boracitic acid. When you apply that 10% liquid out here that's in boracitic acid, it's immediately available. If you use a product like Solubor, you have to apply that product and it's just like nitrogen. It goes in the ground, it goes through a conversion, and then the plant can take it up. So if you have an immediate issue, you don't want to apply Solubor for an immediate issue. That's long term. Like right now, he wants to use a straight boracitic acid, a 10% liquid. That's immediate.
And I've heard people talk about, well, we'll just broadcast boron or zinc, or stuff, micronutrients basically, with your dry fertilizer. And you're doing it, what, 5 pounds, 10 pounds an acre.
Hey, did Wolf Tracks ever make it up here? Are y'all familiar with that product?
They're in our area.
That is the shittiest micronutrient you can ever buy.
They got good marketing.
They do have good marketing. I'll give them that. Hey, we're going to coat this prill of this urea or this DAP, and and then they've got like the little video where they're spreading it out on the field and it's all perfectly even. Has anybody ever looked at the label of Wolf Tracks? What form is it in? It's an oxide. It is the cheapest nutrient known to man. Do you know why? Because it's shit. What does oxides do when they hit the soil and it's wet? What conversion do they go through? We talked about it with iron yesterday a few times. It literally rusts. It'll go through a rust conversion. When nutrients in the soil go through that rust conversion, they bind to other minerals. So you're literally going to put something out here that you'll probably, like David said, get less than 1% availability. So is it worth spending the money on something that you have a 1% availability on by the time that plant is up? No. So if your dealer gets mad at me, just, tell him Russell Hedrick said it was shit and he can call me.
Well, just like Myron was talking about, it's cheaper to feed the plant if you're doing it right, using the right forms at the right time.
Is the dandelions an indication of non-available or?
I've never had one speak to me yet. I really don't know. I do believe that there is truth in that certain weeds or certain plants tell us deficiencies. I'm not one of those people that understand that yet, except for in North Carolina, when we get that brome sage, it's either low in pH. That's the only one that I've ever actually seen that correlate out to. But dandelions could be telling you something, but if we get so hot, those things naturally die in April. That's not a problem for us.
Could have made some dandelion wine here for us.
So the dandelions here is if you haven't been no-tilling for a long time, that is one of your new weeds to have to control after 5 to 6, 7 years of no-tilling. It is a problem. We've south of the farm a few years ago, I wasn't paying attention to dandelions and corn, and we lost 100 bushels of dandelions.
Also, if you look at where the dandelions are, I'm guessing this spot of the field was worked by water this spring.
Yeah, this has had water sit on it 4 or 5 times.
Nice
You
looking
can see
water
how
here.
the corn stuff to kind of move through here, and if you walk up the
How many
hill,
growing points
the
we got on
dandelions
there?
are gone.
I'd say about 200.
Typically, we'll also see them in areas that are a little bit more compacted. So this has probably had water sitting on it and compacted right at the surface. And those taproots are trying to work through that compaction and try to, as much as a pain that they are, they're maybe trying to work through there and reduce some of that compaction. They do have a taproot that does it.
These non-GMO?
There's no more of them.
Yeah, these are all food directed for food grade.
We were joking the other day, like we've had a really bad drought in North Carolina, and the only thing that was growing out there was either palmer or red root pigweed. And I was like, man, if we could only figure out a market for it. And then one of my farming buddies, he was like, if we found a market for this right here, somebody would engineer a blight that would kill it, so we'd have to buy a fungicide to save it. So.
Actually, there's a lot of truth to that. How many of you guys fight tar spot? You have tar spot? No tar spot up here?
It doesn't get this far too often.
It's not this far yet.
But you've heard about it, right?
It's down in Myron's area.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just showed up. Neighbor said he's got it now.
Okay. So tar spot came into the U.S. in 2015. They've been fighting tar spot in Latin America for 100 years. Okay. Where's our winter seed production come from? Okay, think about that. There's a company based out of Chesterfield, Missouri that filed for a patent for genetic resistance to tar spot. It got approved in 2015.
Funny how.
Okay? We didn't have tar spot. Research, tar spot has to, basically, the leaves have to be wet for it to be able to survive. So really humid conditions thrives in, right? So I think it's Ohio State or Michigan State's got a slide deck. They show a center pivot and the outside corners are green and the inside the field is brown dead from tar spot. Okay? There's also research that shows that tar spot only moves by wind. Okay? So in 2015, it made it from Latin America to northern Illinois without touching a single other cornfield all the way up here. Funny how that works. All right? So, Russell, you've had some success with nickel.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you pull a basic tissue test, 99% of the labs don't test for nickel. What we started recognizing is the heavier tar spot infested areas were deficient on nickel in the plant. And so farmers were trying to control it with fungicide, and on tar spot is probably okay at best. What we found is where they started adding in some nickel sulfate, they were probably seeing another 20-30% of control with tar spot.
Yep. So, you ever heard of Don Huber? He's kind of a whack out there, to be honest. But he does have a book of mineral deficiencies and plant diseases, basically. Well, he took leaves and took a hole punch, started hole punching out all the tar spot lesions, and compared to the healthy tissues, found out that the tar spot was actually oxidized manganese in that plant tissue that was at 12,000 parts per million. So it was basically blowing out of that cell like welding slag, okay? And it has to blow out for it to be able to move. But what it lacked was copper, sulfur, and copper, sulfur, and zinc was two of them in that. So the nickel sulfate got that too. And that creates a lactate enzyme that takes that oxidized form to a reduced form. So if you're monitoring your plant nutrition early enough, you can combat a lot of these diseases. And it's interesting because I've had a farmer that about 8 years ago, his water tanks that he keeps for his spray solution are clear. And guess what happens in clear tanks in the summertime? You get algae in it, right? So I had a bright idea. Let's put a little bit of copper sulfate pond algae cleaner in it and clean up the water to keep the screens from plugging up. We have not had tar spot we had not had gray leaf spot, we had not had southern rust. All the neighbors around us have it, okay?
Did he ever test where his levels were?
No, he wasn't
I'd be
doing any
interested in
tissue
that.
testing. But last year, his son tore his bicep and on his right arm, couldn't run the sprayer. So they hired the co-op to come in and spray, and is basically the last field of corn that needed to be sprayed and all the beans. So they hired the co-op come in and spray a residual right after planting and never came back to it. That was the only field that had tar spot. None of their other fields did. All the rest of them had a post application from theirs.
And when you say a little bit,
Like, it doesn't take much. He's used the same container for 8 years.
I mean, most farmers that we're running tissue test Rex on, 6 to 10 ounces of copper. I mean, that's generally, we'd have to go back and even look at some of yours, but I bet you it's between,
it was minimal.
it's 4 to 10 ounces, because copper is helping with natural disease control in the plant. And it doesn't take much.
I think he's using like a cap full of it in every tank once a week.
8 to 12 is what mine were.
So that's
V8 corn.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I mean, when we're looking, this one right here is calling for 0.66 ounces on one of his fields, you know, and then the